Good morning, good afternoon. I am Dr. Canute White. It's nice to be a part of the Turks and Caicos Community College Research Day. I am sitting in, streaming to you from Miramar, Florida. Oh great it is that we can do this virtually and get it done well. It's nice to be with you in your space there on the island, and I will be talking to you about my research, the perception, teachers' perceptions of principals, adaptive leadership practices. You know, it was done in Jamaica, but this research, the findings can be transferred to Turks and Caicos, wherever, right? Especially in the Caribbean island, definitely. Hey, again, it's nice to be here. Let's get into what I'm here to do, right? I'm sure you have my credentials and you have read, I suspect, the abstract. So I'll be talking to you about teachers' perceptions of adaptive leadership practices of principals in Jamaican high schools. This research was done, completed 2021. So it's definitely current. And I'm going to be looking at the research from a number of perspectives. It's two high school that we have used. So basically, let's conceptualize adaptive leadership, the practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges. It's really adjusting, helping them to adjust their unrealistic expectations rather than to satisfy them with this, a situation where they would continue to just look at technical remedies for adaptive challenges. So that's what it's all about. It's facilitate change responses to environmental change, and it's really looking at the dynamics of the environment, internal and external environments of the school system. Adaptive leadership engage followers, teachers, yeah, to identify the most important elements to preserve them, right, as it relates to preserving those elements as part of the institution's heritage. It's experimental because it's also about improvising, yeah, in its approach to the leadership process, improvise throughout the adaptive leadership process. It build a culture of diverse views, because it's not about the leader, the principal, but it's about everybody, the stakeholders of the institution. So that must be understood. It's not, it's a genus of a few persons within the management team, right? But yeah, it's not only relying on that, but incorporating other persons throughout the institution. So adaptive leadership principles in conceptualizing it also speaks to recognizing persons who may feel incompetent, betrayed, or irrelevant as a result of the innovation of by others. Yeah, so you recognize them as well, and it also relates to accepting the benefits of exploration and not necessarily exploitation of what is there. So these are the things you fix the problem through through not technical change system, the technical approach, but adaptive approach. So it's not textbook approach. So technical leadership focuses on problem solving and first order changes within the existing structure. Adaptive leadership involves deep or second order changes that alter existing values and norms in an organization. Statement of the problem. Jamaican high school, its colleges also would be forced to interact with social and cultural changes as the environment becomes more sensitive and challenging. So change must be, when change happens, the high school must respond to these changes, right? These environmental changes. And if they don't, then this will create a dysfunction within the school and within the college's operations. So that must be understood. And it can be a problem there. Adaptive leadership model should be employed to support institutional growth. And the change initiative are to be developed by high school colleges in order for them to survive during challenging times. Purpose of the study is basically a qualitative case study to explore and compare constraints and enablers in the use of adaptive leadership principles, but how they motivate teachers, mobilize teachers in response to environmental changes. Research question: to what extent are teachers motivated and mobilized in response to environmental adaptive changes experienced by the institution? What are the constraints and enablers faced by the principals in the motivating and mobilizing teachers in response to environmental adaptive changes experienced by the institution? What are the indicators that adaptive leadership practices are being used in the institution? Very important. So yeah, administrators can benefit from this. It can, in terms of the Ministry of Education, ministries of education can create form policies from this, and principals could understand the environmental changes of their school to effectively practice adaptive leadership. And the literature seems to be dull on this, especially in the Caribbean. So school colleges have been affected by adaptive changes, yes, and we understand the rationale of this study because the changes that happen affect the organizational, institutional growth, and actually educational entities have to take a unique approach to the concept of adaptive leadership based on the context of its reality. So we have their objective. One of them is the usefulness of adaptive leadership in the school. We need to understand that, and also to understand the outcome after employing adaptive leadership, among other objectives. The literature, yes, Miller talk about the fact that environmental changes experienced by schools in the rural parts of Jamaica and the critical role played by principals in ensuring institutional growth. It was also suggested in the literature that teachers' perception of principals' leadership practices can affect teachers' performance, and also found that the principal's leadership style may influence the capacity and the students' learning. So the literature has a lot to say on this thing. The run change agent study also implied that the successful change response in school, there should be belief and commitment to change practices. So the literature of its way. You can get my book, Adaptive School Leadership, School Leaders Connected with Environment, by Dr. White, and this will explain many more than what I will be talking to you about. It's really what I'm talking to you about in details, right? So if you get that book on Amazon, it will be good. Adaptive School Leadership by Canute White. So I've collected data collection and instrument. I have used an interview protocol, Zoom video conferencing. It was done during the pandemic, and approximately 12 teachers and 6 administrators for both schools had been used. But let me clarify this. We have traditional high school, non-traditional high school. Traditional high schools are those that were high schools from the beginning. Non-traditional high schools are secondary schools that students would not have needed to pass the external exam to enter, but could just enter those schools, and it usually attract the less bright students and perhaps less competent, qualified teachers but they have been upgraded to high schools now, and we call them non-traditional high schools, right? So we need to understand that concept. So use convenient sampling, most commonly used in behavioral and educational studies. Definitely traditional high school, as I said, were those schools that were originally high schools, but the non-traditional high schools were basically those schools that have been upgraded to high schools from secondary levels. So 30 minutes interviews and informed consent were sent through email to participants. So the findings are extremely important. But let's look at the external challenges faced by non-traditional high schools and traditional high schools. For the non-traditional high schools, those schools have said that were admitting students from the primary schools, right, the elementary schools, without having to pass an external exam. So, in other words, non-traditional high school had attracted, well, the secondary school before they become high school, they had attracted um, the less brilliant, less bright, so to speak, students, and perhaps not forever qualified teachers. But now that they have been upgraded, they are called non-traditional high school in comparison to those traditional high schools. So poverty is what we saw in the tradition, the non-traditional high schools. Um, Community crime and disputes, digital age that facilitates knowledge, economic conditions faced by teachers, lack of parental support, regular dance hall attendance by these students in the non-traditional high schools. And the traditional high school now, we see lack of parental support, we see gross societal indiscipline and homosexuality, home issues, and we found out that community socialization, happens for these students experience that, and unacceptable parental behavior were also reported in the traditional high schools. Those are the external challenges. Internal challenges for the non-traditional high school: learning disability among students, teachers' inability to deal with learning disability, um, constant lateness of students, intra-staff conflict, communication issues among staff, lack of resources from government. That's a non-traditional high school. The traditional high school, that was studied, the case that was studied, students selling in classroom, inadequate government resources, inadequate instructional resources, teachers not readily accepting changes, personal issues with colleagues, teachers' concerns about leadership, financial constraint by institutions, inadequate training in behavioral issues, and inefficiencies in teaching learning process. So those came up. But let's look at the internal challenge from the non-traditional high school, the one that talks about lack of resources. One participant responded, there is nobody that is looking at it. Where the government is expecting you to perform, the ministry is expecting you to perform. Many of them don't even give you anything, any of the resources that you need to perform, but you are expected to perform just like the other schools who have gotten everything. And the traditional high school, and it relates to personal issues, one participant's remarks. In addition to the leadership style with administration, people also have issues with the middle managers. They have issues with them colleagues, and of course, that will affect how we perform in the day-to-day activity of schools. So the internal challenges as it relates to teachers' inability to deal with learning disability of students. That's for the non-traditional high school. One person commented, they lack creativity, the students. They don't want to use their brain. They don't want to use things around them to generate their ideas. They just want you to tell them everything. That is where I am having a great challenge that coming from a participant as it from the non-traditional high school. Internal challenges, traditional high school leadership. One participant said, I think sometimes you see there is no agreement in terms of how leadership may approach a situation versus how the teaching staff may decide to approach a situation. So they speak of those differences. So it continued with the findings as it relates to to research question one, to what extent are teachers motivated and mobilized in response to environmental adaptive changes? The non-traditional high school. Some teachers take the easy way out in response to challenges based on lack of mobilization from some leaders. Somebody had said, because more times when the problem arises and we try to go through the channel, the persons who are in leadership, they throw up their hands in the air too. So you try to see how you can work it out. For the non-traditional high school, same research question one, most leaders are not in a state of readiness to mobilize the teachers. And as it was expressed by one participant, some of the middle managers often suggest that the teachers just work with the program. Yeah, so we get that. And continuing, some teachers for the traditional high school, same research question one, some teachers are not adequately mobilized in response to environmental changes and challenges. However, a number of efforts were made in this regard. To what extent? Same with research question one. For the traditional high school, leadership facilitates a level of preparedness which would enable the institution's capacity to strive as well as the teacher's capacity to strive in a changing environment. Interesting. For the traditional high school, we also here in terms of research question one, teachers were used by the institution to teach other teachers from the institution about special education as seen from the leader's lens. One participant stated that in terms of the problem they're faced in the classroom, the main one would have been the teaching learning, and we focus on it. Yeah, that's interesting. And when we look at the overall findings of the study, we realize that teachers mobilization in the non-traditional high school was not practical because of principals unpreparedness, and teachers were not adequately mobilized in the traditional high school. Secondly, B, trust and resistance to change were among the constraints to mobilization in non-traditional high school. Appreciative gestures were enablers in non-traditional high school, while trust issues and the teacher's personality were constraints in the traditional high school, with practices of appreciation and the charismatic leadership being among its enablers. And for C, motivation was limited in non-traditional high school because of teacher dissatisfaction and absenteeism, but monetary motivation was more important in traditional high school. It is likely that the traditional high school would have less difficulty executing adaptive leadership than the non-traditional high school. Those are the overall findings of the study. All participants view this thing about adaptive leadership. For one participant at the traditional high school says adaptive leadership basically has to do with, and I am going to say this, how the leadership style of teachers and administrators helps not only the teachers to adapt to the changes on the inside of the school, but adapt to the changes imposed on the school life, external forces, as well as how the leadership style of the teachers will help the students to adapt to the changes inside the school, as well as the forces that are external to the students. Those are the things I understand by adaptive leadership. That's the participant from the traditional high school. From the non-traditional high school, one participant see adaptive leadership. So adaptive leadership, as you were looking at adaptive leadership, in my own way, I see adaptive leadership as a way to go because there is no one leadership style, okay, that is going to work in any institution. You have to look at what best suits the institution that you are in, and you have to change the fit to fit the institution for you to be an adaptive person, for you to be an adaptive person, so you can know the psychology. You know when to strike the iron at and when to step back and do the rethinking and come again. So look, in conclusion, really, no extensive policy oriented practice of adaptive leadership in either of these cases, these schools, either of these institutions, as a leadership style practice was not considered or named by any of the participants as adaptive leadership. Responsiveness to the idea of practicing adaptive leadership in the institutions, there really, there really was some responsiveness, right? They need that sort of adaptive leadership approach. And elements of adaptive leadership apparently exist, but need to be identified and institutionalized, hence become named and learned practice, organizational learning, with shared vision as these organizations moved forward. Based on the evidence, it is highly likely that the traditional high school would have less difficulty executing the concept of adaptive leadership, as it has fewer constraints than the non-traditional high school. Attempts to mobilize teachers are apparently different between both schools, category of schools, and as such, it may also be concluded that the traditional high school is more likely to grow and develop in challenging environment circumstances than the non-traditional high school. Some general recommendations from the participants. School leaders need to be trained in behavioral sciences. Leaders should build on the individual and institutional competence, the human resource, and build on it. They also suggested that leaders should find out what motivates each teacher, motivate them to respond to challenges through adaptive leadership process. Also, according to a participant's recommendation, leaders should place more focus on identifying the strengths of teachers, place them in group that can assist in challenging areas of academic and behavior. They also believe that leaders should highlight the achievement of teachers through expression of appreciation, critical. And they also think that leaders should facilitate the conduct of staff development activities at the middle of the school year when students are familiar with teachers, and the teaching style instead of at the beginning. And also, they recommended that leaders should need to consult teachers with a view to try some of the solutions and ideas presented by teachers. And that is also critical. Give them a voice, listen to them. What were some of my recommendation? You will see there, that's in the book at Amazon by Dr. Canute White, School Leadership, Adaptive School Leadership. One, the leadership should conduct a professional SWOT analysis once every 2 years. Critical. The institution leadership should find ways to enhance the organization's trust level, especially between teachers and leaders. This could be done through seminars, regular socials, and interactions between teachers and leaders. Also, conduct occasional interviews through random selection with students in order to identify new challenges and generate solutions. So that is critical. Also, middle managers such as head of head of heads of department and grade supervisors need to convene a meeting once every school term in order to identify emerging challenges and make solutions as to how teachers and middle managers may respond to these challenges. I also recommended that because of the contextual nature of the areas of HODs and grade supervisors, they should conduct periodical departmental grade seminars, workshops using in-house and external competent resource persons in an effort to mobilize teachers at the departmental and grade levels. Critical. You can send your question. I know that I'm in Miramar, Florida, and you're in Turks and Caicos Island. At the community college, you're having your research there. It's nice to be with you. But you can send your question to me because I'm virtual and it's pre-recorded to wradio668 at gmail.com. That's wradio668 at gmail.com. My Instagram, Canyouth, Canyouth apostrophe S, exploration. You can send me a message through that now. I will respond to you. YouTube channel, Canyouth Media, Canyouth B apostrophe S, media. You may request a copy of the reference list. I will send it to you when you send me an email requesting it. And yeah, you may also purchase a book, you remember, on Amazon or through me, Dr. Canute White. It's really nice to talk with you. If there are any questions and you perhaps need to understand more, yeah, purchase the book, but you can also send me an email and I will talk to you more about this study that I had just gone through with you, and you will be able to understand teachers, those of you in the industry, to understand adaptive leadership in the high schools, be it in Turks and Caicos or anywhere that you're listening from, anywhere that you're watching from, anywhere that you will be able, would want to implement adaptive leadership in your school, and try to convince your government to implement or to create a curriculum and adaptive leadership in its the training of principals, because that is critical that you encourage your leaders to do that. And I tell you this, the non-traditional high school has improved a lot because the structure of changes, the internal environment has changes and change, and the external environment has also changed, and they're catching up, they're catching up, and the students are performing better now than they had been performing uh, during the secondary schools stage of the non-traditional high school. So yeah, it's important for you to reflect on that and see how best you can generate in your school, institutionalize in your institution adaptive leadership principles so as to ensure that your teachers perform better, and when your teachers perform better, your students will perform better, and your school will grow, and your school will be highlighted as a good performing school, and it's you won't regret it. So as you approach the challenges, the adaptive challenges in your environment, be ready to use adaptive leadership. I am Dr. Canute White. It was nice talking to you. It was nice bringing this research to you. And all the best to Turks and Caicos Community College on your research day and in the future as you grow as a college, and the other colleges, principals, teachers that are there. All the best to you as your institution grow. And I thank you for being a part of the research day and a part of this research episode. Teachers' perceptions of adaptive leadership practices of principals in Jamaican high schools. Thank you very much.